Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started because it's 9 o'clock. And I want to respect everybody's time this morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning for our webinar. Our webinar is on positive self-talk and an attitude of gratitude. So hopefully you are in the right place. Today we will talk about self-talk and how it can affect our perception of stressful life events. We'll talk about why is positive self-talk crucial to maintaining a healthy sense of resilience. How do we show ourselves kindness and compassion? And how does an attitude of gratitude change the way that we look at things? We'll also talk about how can we use gratitude to reframe some of the negative thought patterns and pessimism that perhaps we've fallen into a rut, and perhaps that's kind of been like that for a while. Okay, I see that someone has raised their hand. You're gonna have to bear with me because I um, do not have a assistant this morning. So I'm let's see. Oop, okay. Looks like whoever raised their hand is no longer raising their hand. So okay, go ahead and okay. Oh, it's Linda. Got it. Okay. All right. Let's see. Linda, let me find you so I can unmute you. Linda, can you maybe type it into the Q&A or the chat, whatever your question is, because right now I cannot find you on my list. Okay. Okay, let's see. You need a meeting ID for your computer. If you're already in the, if you can already see the PowerPoint slide, then you're already in it. Oh, I see. You're on your phone. The meeting ID will be in an email that was sent to you earlier this morning. I cannot navigate to that to help you with that. As I said, I am on my own today. So if someone can possibly put that up for Linda, I would appreciate it. Okay. And Linda, if you're just on the phone and you're listening in, that's okay too. There's a PowerPoint, but you're not missing very much if you can't see the PowerPoint. Okay. So don't worry very much about that part. Okay. So we're going to go back to what we were talking about. Okay. So how can we use gratitude to reframe negative thought patterns and pessimism, right? So that's kind of that's our topic for today. Okay. And to begin with, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jenny Peterson, and I'm a program specialist here at the USC Family Caregiver Support Center. Our center serves and supports family caregivers in LA County by providing resources and information. Our family care navigators, which is just a fancy way of saying our social workers, offer support and guidance to families who are trying to navigate what we call the caregiving journey. Okay. We have support groups, we have trainings, we have classes, and we have community education workshops, such as the one you're in right now. So if you are unfamiliar with our organization, I highly encourage you to give us a call on our 800 number or to visit our website to find out more information. I'll go ahead and put up that information at the end of the presentation. I'll put it up on the screen for you. Okay. So let's get started. Okay. Now, are you an optimist or a pessimist? Right. Um, One of the key factors in emotional resilience is optimism. Okay. Now, that's not to say that we don't have our natural tendencies to lean one way or the other. And if you're honest with yourself, you know that you know which way you're going, right? You know if you're an optimism, if you're a pessimism or a pessimist, or if you're somewhere in the middle, you know. Um, and you know, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can fall, as I said, you could fall somewhere in the middle. And funny enough, you may even think you're an optimist, but the people around you would disagree, right? And I say that because one time I was in a meeting, and we were asked this very question: Are you an optimist or a pessimist, right? And one of the ladies in the meeting said, "You know, I think I'm an optimist." And the rest of us around the table turned around and looked at her, and we were like, what? Because, we all thought she was a pessimist. So, so it's very important to realize that even if you do think yourself as an optimist, people around you might disagree, right? Or maybe you think of yourself as a pessimist, but people around you disagree. So a lot of different kind of perceptions about that. Okay. Now, optimists have been shown to lead healthier, longer lives. Okay. And some studies have even shown that optimists can live an extra 5 to 10 years longer than pessimists. A positive outlook tends to lead to better self care practice. Okay. So if we're optimists, if we have a positive outlook, then that sort of motivates us to want to take better care of ourselves. Okay. Now, in addition to better health, optimists can also report um, a better overall quality of life than pessimists. Okay. And optimists are less likely to suffer from, mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. Okay. Now, one how do you learn optimism? Okay. Dr. Martin Seligman, one of the founding fathers of today's positive psychology movement, argues that a pessimist can actually improve his or her outlook to be more positive through conscious effort. Okay. And he called this practice learned optimism. The idea of learning optimism focuses on consciously changing your negative self talk away from negative thoughts or patterns. Okay. And that means for those of us who, are not born optimists, we still have hope, right? We're not out of luck. Okay. We can learn optimism. And learned optimism is not about burying your head in the sand and ignoring all the bad things that happen. Okay. It's not about rainbows, unicorns, and rose colored glasses. We don't have to have a Pollyanna view of the world. Okay. What we're talking about is a realistic type of optimism, one in which we accept the difficulty or the challenge of the situation that we're in, right? But we still strive to view the circumstances as temporary and within our ability to change. Now, let's repeat that because these 2 points are very, very important. Temporary being one, and two, within our ability to change. Okay. Now, why are these two things important? Well, these two conditions are important because it leads us to the root of the difference between optimists and pessimists. Okay. When bad things happen to optimists, they are filled with the belief that the situation is temporary and it's specific and it's caused by an external force, right? And when something is caused by when you believe that something is caused by an external force, then that means that that is changeable, right? And this type of explanation about the world around them allows optimists to really tackle adversity and even empowers them to believe that they can change the circumstances in a positive manner. Okay. Now, optimists are able to let things go more easily than pessimists, precisely because they believe they can change the situation. Remember what we said, it's within our ability to change what's happening, right? Now, in contrast, when we look at pessimists, okay, when bad things happen to pessimists, they tend to believe that the situation is permanent, right? It's pervasive and it's caused by some internal force. Okay. Pessimists often view difficult situations as a result of failure on their part. Okay. In other words, it's not uncommon for pessimists to believe that they've somehow contributed to their own challenges, right? And one of the biggest things is feeling like they are not enough, right? Pessimists are often perfectionists, or they're, what you would call type A personalities. Okay. Now, pessimism and negative self talk often stems from a natural tendency to dwell on things that maybe have not gone as planned or not perfect. If you find yourself awake at night, kind of rolling thoughts over and over in your head, thinking, well, how could this have been different? How would this, how could this have changed? How could I have done better? Right. This is what we're talking about, is, kind of being sort of stuck on things and dwelling on them, right? Not being able to let it go, right? Now, the key word here is to dwell on things, right? When you dwell and when you obsess over things, you allow all the other happier parts of your life to pass you by because you're so fixated on that one thing, right? And as I said before, pessimists have a hard time letting go. They like to overthink and overanalyze situations even if the moment is past, right? And as in my example, what I just said earlier, sometimes you lay awake at night and you're just rolling these thoughts in your head, rolling them around, and they keep you up at night, right? So as I mentioned earlier, learned optimism is being realistic. It's a realistic acceptance of a situation. Okay. And more importantly, it's how to cope positively and move forward. Okay. Now, remember what I said earlier, that a big part of it is believing that something is within our ability to change, right? So, a big part of learned optimism, like the hugest part, is the belief that you can indeed move forward from the challenges that are being thrown your way, and that change comes from within yourself, that you have that ability to change. Now, um when you believe that it's not within your ability to change, that's when you start to kind of think down these negative thought cycles, and to really sort of um, allow yourself to begin over analyzing and overthinking these situations and these challenges, right? And then you become sort of overwhelmed because you feel like, oh boy, this is out of my control, I can't change things, right? So feeling like you're in control, feeling like you are able to change things is a big part of learning optimism. Okay. Now, this is of course not to say that learning optimism is not an easy change, right? It's not an easy change, particularly if we are not used to that style of thinking. Okay. It is a mental change that comes with effort and practice. And when we learn new skills, we need to work hard at it in the beginning. But when we become more used to it, it becomes easier. It's like going to the gym or exercising when you haven't done it in a while, right? And in that example, in the beginning, you probably feel like you're pushing yourself too hard. But when you become used to that level of exercise and activity, it becomes easier and easier for you to do. It becomes more comfortable to accomplish that exercise that perhaps seemed to you in the beginning like you couldn't do it, right? So let's talk about, is your self-talk positive or negative? Okay. Now, a key ingredient in learned optimism, what we just talked about, is engaging in positive self talk. Now, many of us go through our day to day lives with a harsh inner critic. Okay. Self talk is that voice in your mind, in your head, which says things that perhaps you don't necessarily say out loud. Right. Now, given some of us do talk out loud to ourselves, I'm one of those people. When we're not, when nobody is around us, or even when other people are around us, right? But that's self talk, right? And many of us kind of keep it silent in our heads, in our minds, right? Now this self-talk happens all day long, right? It can happen without you even realizing it, all right? And you can think of it as a running commentary in the back of your mind as you go through your day, okay? Now, positive self-talk is what makes you feel good about yourself, okay? And the things that happen around you, right? Whatever's going on around you. Okay. What I call positive self talk, um, your personal cheerleader, right? So some of the examples I would give is, ooh, my hair looks good today, right? Or, ooh, I am so energized. I will get a lot done today. Or, oh boy, I feel stressed out, but I know I can overcome whatever's coming up. I can tackle it, and I shall be victorious, right? So that's positive self-talk. Okay. So what is negative self-talk? Well, negative self-talk is destructive, okay? And it tears down your confidence and self-esteem. It makes you feel unhappy about yourself and what is happening around you. It's what I would call the Debbie Downer. I'm sure you all have heard this phrase, right? It's what I call the Debbie Downer of your internal monologue, right? So what are some examples of this? Okay, some examples are, I feel terrible in these clothes. I look horrible. What's going on with my hair? I'm such a hot mess, right? And specifically for caregivers, how can I care for someone else when I can't even take care of myself? Right? Those are thoughts that run through our head when we're having negative self-talk. Okay. Now, if you keep hearing this about yourself over an extended period of time, the negative self-talk can actually seriously erode and destroy your own your self-worth, right? You could talk yourself out of things that might actually benefit you. You'll talk yourself out of risk taking, right? You'll talk yourself out of making progress or making a change. Okay. So in the long run, it has a way of becoming a pattern or a cycle. Okay. And what I like to say a lot is negative energy acts like a magnet to attract more negative energy. Okay. Likewise, positive energy attracts positive energy, right? Now, positive self talk is about becoming aware of your thought patterns and trying to manage them productively. If you change your thought patterns, you can really influence your own emotions and actions in a positive way. Okay. Now, positive thought patterns lead to positive emotions, which can help you to deal with negative messages and stressors. Okay. And it will allow you to harness your inner voice for good. Keeping a positive mindset drives us to accomplish things that we may not have thought that we could. You know, perhaps there was a part of us that said, "Oh no, I can't do that. I don't think, I don't think that's within me to do." Right. And then your personal cheerleader steps up, positive self talk, right, and says, no, I think I can do it. I just need to buckle down and do it. I can, take baby steps. I can achieve this goal, right? Um, One of the things that happens is when we do a lot of negative self talk and we end up discouraging ourselves from things, or we end up beating ourselves up for making mistakes or criticizing ourselves, right? Um, we have to ask ourselves, is this true? Is there proof? Okay. So, for instance, when we say, oh, I'm a terrible caregiver because I can't even get my loved one dressed for the day. Okay. And ask yourself, is this true? Is there proof? Okay. Is there proof that you are a terrible caregiver? Well, perhaps you didn't get your loved one dressed for the day, but you've managed to feed them breakfast. You've given them their morning, medication, their pills. Okay. And that in itself is something to celebrate, to kind of pat yourself on the back, right? That uh, is proof that not only are you not a terrible caregiver, but you are a good caregiver, and um, you are trying your very, very best, right? So this is one of the things that I encourage you to practice. When you find yourself going through these negative thought patterns, these negative thought cycles, ask yourself, is this true? Is there proof? Right? Or is it just your mind going through this cycle of, um, being super critical about yourself, right? And being negative. Okay. So when you practice this, when you practice these exercises and ask yourself, is this true? Is there proof? Right? Um, Keep in mind that change does not happen overnight, right? And back to our exercise example, much like we can fall out of practice with exercise or activities that we haven't done in a while, it does take time and conscious effort to find your groove and create that inner change that we're looking for. You know, many of us probably have to overcome years of negative thought patterns. So don't get discouraged. Okay. We have to we have to show resilience in trying to make a positive change. We have to take baby steps, right? We can't go from thinking critically and having negative self-talk to kind of, being 100% positive, right? And the other thing is, you know, what did I say earlier? I said that, you know, positive self-talk is not about being Pollyanna, right? It's not about burying your head in the sand and ignoring bad things, right? It's about being realistic and sort of being able to look um, at the positive side of things instead of the negative side. Okay. And it is hard because many of us have sort of developed a habit, right, of speaking negatively to ourselves in our own minds, right? So, how do we practice self compassion? Okay. When a friend, think about this, when a friend comes to you for comfort when they are going through a hard time, how do you respond to them? Do you practice and show your friend compassion and kindness? Okay. Now, I want you to, most of the time when people come to you when they're going through a hard time, you say, "Oh, it's okay. You are doing your best. We can only do what we can do." So you try to be very uplifting, right? You try to be positive for your friend who's going through a hard time, right? Now, I want you to think about this. Keep this in mind, okay? And turn this scenario around, okay? And consider when you yourself are going through a hard time, how do you respond to yourself? Okay? How do you respond to your own troubles? Do you respond with the same level of compassion and kindness that you would be showing your friend? Now keep in mind, we kind of just talked about, okay, we would be kind, we would be gentle, we would show compassion to our friend who's going through a hard time, right? And when you turn it on yourself, what happens? What happens in your mind? How do you respond to yourself? And at this point in the presentation, I've given this presentation many times, people start giggling and laughing, right? Because many of us realize that we are not kind and compassionate to ourselves. Okay. Most of us face a harsh inner critic. We are so critical about ourselves, right? We are tougher on ourselves than others. Okay. We have high expectations of ourselves, especially caregivers. We have high expectations because, we are caring for somebody else, right? We're caring for a loved one. And this leads us to be more likely to self-criticize. Sometimes the thoughts go through your head, "Oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Why would I do that?" Or, "Oh my gosh, that was such a terrible dumb thing to do." Right? Or maybe you're embarrassed or ashamed of what you think as your failure, right? Or maybe you dwell obsessively on your perceived shortcomings, right? So, in short, we really are our own worst enemies, right? Isn't that kind of crazy that we are kinder to others than we are to ourselves? I think that's always one of those things that is very enlightening to find out, that, hey, why am I being so much more critical and so much harsher on myself than I would be to, a good friend or, someone who is coming to me for comfort, right? So now self-compassion, this is what we call self-compassion, right? Self-compassion is an important part of emotional resilience. All right. Now, self-compassion, in addition to positive self-talk, which we just covered, right, is a way to change your internal monologue, to change your self-talk your inner voice, right? To focus on what we would call the silver linings in your life. Okay. It can lead you to be kinder to yourself. Okay. Which in turn influences your ability to cope with stressful situations. Okay. It can help you to recognize and learn from your mistakes. Okay. And it can also motivate you to get up and try again. Remember how we talked about we're trying to sort of pump ourselves up, right? We're trying to have our own personal internal cheerleader, right? And when we show ourselves compassion, okay, when we tell ourselves, you know what, I made a mistake, but I learned from it and I'm going to move on, or let's try again, right? Or I'm this yes, this situation is difficult, but I will cope with it and I will be able to move on. When we have that feeling, when we feel like we can tackle things, okay, because we are uh, again, because we are thinking positively, right? Because we're looking at the silver lining in things, okay? Instead of being your own enemy, instead of being an inner enemy, you you are gaining an inner ally. Okay. People who practice self-compassion report lower levels of anxiety, stress, depression, and feelings of shame and failure, right? Um, so think about this, right? How do we practice self compassion? Okay. Self compassion is not one of those things that comes easily to us. Okay. Like I said before, we are not naturally kind to ourselves. We are harsher to ourselves than others, right? So the simplest way to practice self compassion is to ask yourself, what would I say to a close friend going through the same situation? Okay. Now, most of us can answer this question more easily because thinking about that close friend, okay, allows us a little bit of emotional distance, right? To be a little bit more objective. Okay. So that's one technique that you can use to practice more self-compassion. Okay. A lot of times uh when we put other people into that question, when we say, okay, what would I do if my best friend came to me and he or she was telling me about this situation? What would I say to that friend? Okay. And even though there is no close friend, that close friend is actually you, right? But just thinking about it, reframing that gives you some emotional distance, right? So that you can look at it like, okay, either I'm blowing this out of proportion, I'm not a total loser for failing to do this, right? It's not a failure. It is something that I can learn from, and maybe improve the next time, right? See how that kind of leads to being more objective, right? Rather than sort of just being stuck in this cycle of, oh, I'm terrible, I can't do anything right, I'm such a failure, so being kind and being compassionate to ourselves, being gentle to ourselves is a very, very large part of being able to turn around our self talk. Okay. Now, if you think about it, if you are around someone who, is just constantly picking at you, telling you, oh, you can't do anything right. You look terrible today. Well, why did you do that?
that wasn't very smart. All these things, right? I could go on and on, right? Um, all these negative sort of comments. Um, if you were to hear that from another person, there would probably be a part of you that says, "What? What am I doing here? I don't have to put up with this, right? Why is this person treating me that way?" All right. Um, and the same thing applies to yourself, right? If your self-talk is negative and you're hearing that, and remember how I told you self-talk is kind of like you're going on and on inside your head all day, every day, right? So imagine hearing this all day, every day, over and over again, all these negative thoughts, right? All these kind of criticisms, right? Um, you can't unlike, you know, uh when you hear it from another person, when you hear it in your self-talk, it's not like you can just say, well, forget that. I'm just not going to call up that person. I'm just not going to talk to that person, right? Because really, we're talking about what's going on in your own head. Okay. There's no way to sort of distance that, right? So that's why we sort of need to kind of um, reframe the way that we talk to ourselves, right? When we reframe the way that we talk to ourselves, then we kind of are able to really start building up our own confidence, right? Because that's the big thing, is when we hear all this negativity about ourselves, okay, regardless of if somebody else is saying it or if you are saying it to yourself inside your own head, right? It just tears you down. It wears you down slowly, 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 right? And it really takes a big toll on your confidence, right? Your self-worth, your self-value, right? um we start to think, wow, i just I just can't do anything right, you know and that's what we're trying to avoid. That's what we're trying to get away from, is being able to sort of congratulate ourselves, to look at things like, okay, you know, um, I may not have done ABC today, but I did accomplish XYZ, right? So just, being a little bit in being able to reframe that, and the way that we perceive what is happening um, is how we can sort of shift ourselves a little bit into that positive, optimistic side of that spectrum, right? Now, I'm not saying, I think of positivity and optimism as one end of the spectrum, and on the other end, we have negativity and pessimism, right? And so somewhere, many of us do not fall, um, s- you know, absolutely on one side of the spectrum, right? We are all somewhere in between. Okay. But what I've found, talking to a lot of, family caregivers, and even just people in general, right, is that we often fall on the pessimistic side, more on the pessimistic half of the spectrum, right? Um, it there's another class that I do where there's an exercise where we rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, how optimistic are you? Right, and people, um, you know most of the time, as I said, people fall on the more pessimistic half of it, you know. Rarely one or two people in the class, they will be more at the optimistic side, which is great because that means, they've got a head start on the rest of us, right? But being on that uh realizing that you're not alone in that, right, is also important, right? To know that we all kind of are going through similar, self talk, right? Similar emotions. And we're all kind of struggling with being kinder, more gentle to ourselves. Okay. So, we're not talking about moving all the way from one end of the spectrum to the other, right? We're talking about maybe kind of shifting it a little bit closer to the optimistic side, right? And some of us, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest, right? Some of us will never make it into the optimistic side, okay? But that's okay. That's okay. We all have our own personalities and our own situations and whatever, right? But the point here is to kind of be able to shift it a little bit, okay? And to be able to at least uh you know make a little bit of difference, okay? So it's food for thought. Okay. I know for a lot of people it's very, very difficult because we are sort of, we've been conditioned our whole lives to think a certain way. Um, and part of this is also, wrapped up in, um, how we were raised, right? We were raised, uh, a lot of us, like, you know, be humble, don't brag, don't pat yourself on the back, right? All these things, right? And so, which, is true to some degree, but I think as adults, it really sort of uh, kind of trips us up, right? Because then we think, ooh, okay, well, I've got to be humble and, don't brag. Like, oh no, and then you talk to caregivers, and caregivers think, it oh, it's no big deal what I do. I just do it, you know. Um I take my parent to the doctor. I do their laundry, or oh, I feed, my husband or my wife and make sure he or she gets dressed every morning, right? And all these little things should be celebrated. All these little things should be um, looked at as small accomplishments that you've done throughout the day, right? But if you think about it, many of us have gotten to that point where we just think, oh, that's nothing. Anybody could do that, right? And so that's kind of um, where we want to change that, right? Because as caregivers, it's important to realize, no, not everyone can do that, right? Caregivers are a very special breed of people. Okay. You are doing this out of, love for your family member, your loved one that you're caring for. Okay. There's nothing that says you have to be doing what you're doing, right? You're doing this because, um, something in your heart is telling you, I need to do this, right? So, uh, so being able to recognize that, and to recognize the little baby steps that we take every day, you know, as I said in my example earlier, okay, well, maybe your loved one. didn't get dressed for the day and is still in pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, right? But did you, you've fed your loved one, you've done the laundry, you've started the, you've done the laundry, there are no dirty dishes in the sink, you know. So you're doing all right. You're not doing as you're not doing as badly as, perhaps, you're thinking, right? That you're doing, right? So so looking at being positive, as long as your loved one is, healthy, happy, and not in any harm or danger, some of the things um, that we think are absolutely necessary, right? Um, some of those things can be let go, right? Um, for example, and I'm going to go back to this example, um, you know, getting dressed for the day. You've done all these other things, and perhaps your loved one is not even going out. You're not even going to see anybody. You're not even leaving the house that day, right? So that's something that perhaps you can let go, right? Because your loved one is happy, healthy, and is it really worth creating this huge hubbub, this huge brouhaha about, getting changed for the day, right? Um, so there are some things that once we learn, okay, maybe I can let that go. Everything doesn't need to be perfect, you know. Um, caregiving is not about perfection, right? A lot of things are not perfect. And once we learn to accept that, then we sort of are, then we're able to really embrace that, hey, I think I'm, I think I'm doing a pretty good job, you know? I was able to do XYZ today, right? And then when you are able to sort of come to that conclusion is when you start to kind of feel better about what you're doing, right? You, instead of feeling like you're a failure, you sort of feel like, hey, wow, I accomplished something today. I did something important today, right? So that's how um, negative or positive self talk can really affect your caregiving, can affect your emotions, can affect the way that you cope with situations, right? And just the simplest way, as I said earlier, is to ask yourself, what would I say, or you know, what would I say or recommend to a close friend who's going through the same thing? Okay, so that is just something for you to practice. When you have a little bit more time. Okay. Now today we're going to be talking about gratitude and how that helps us to have positive self talk, right? If you'll remember earlier, I said that positive self talk is not easy, right? Particularly if we have been sort of stuck in this negative thought pattern for a long time, right? Which many of us, I mean, let's be honest, many of us have, right? And so, one of the ways to start on that journey or to practice, okay, is to think more about gratitude. And as the title of this webinar um, uh, goes, an attitude of gratitude, right? And I'll be talking about gratitude journaling as a way to do this. Okay. And this technique is actually different from regular journaling because here in gratitude journaling, we're trying to focus on the positive things in our lives that we are grateful for. Okay. And in fact, hopefully, this will be an opportunity to learn about the things that you may have, always kind of appreciated, right? But maybe had taken for granted, okay? Or things that you never really thought about, but you realize, hey, okay, I am grateful for those things, right? So let's talk about gratitude and how it affects us, right? Gratitude is a social emotion. Now, what do I mean by that? What's a social emotion, right? It's a relationship building emotion because it requires you to examine how you've been supported and affirmed by other people. Okay. Now, according to a researcher, Dr. Robert Emmons, who is, one of the leading researchers on gratitude. Okay, he says that gratitude can change people in four significant ways. Okay, now the first being gratitude allows us to celebrate the present. Okay, now, gratitude it magnifies our positive emotions, right? There's been research that shows that positive emotions, wear off quickly. Okay, so our emotional systems, our minds, our brains, we like newness. We crave newness. Okay, we like we like novelty. We like change. Okay. So we adapt to positive life circumstances, um, that before too long, your new car, your new spouse, your new house, your new friend, right? Before too long, they don't feel quite so new anymore, right? They're not quite so exciting anymore. The newness wears off, right? But here we go. We bring in gratitude, okay? And gratitude is what makes us appreciate the value of something, okay? And when we appreciate the value of something, we end up extracting more benefits from it. In other words, we are less likely to take that thing for granted, right? It allows us to see things that perhaps we have gone blind to. Okay. Remember how I said we love newness, right? So as soon as the newness of something wears off, you become sort of blind to it, right? You no longer see it. Okay. And being able to practice gratitude allows us to be able to look at those things again and see them for what they are. Okay, we're not taking them for granted anymore, right? So gratitude, in a way, allows us to participate more in life. Right? We notice the positives more, and that magnifies the pleasures that you get from life, right? Instead of adapting to the goodness, to the newness, becoming blind to things that, are no longer novel to us, right? We are celebrating goodness when we look at it with gratitude, right? We spend so much time watching things these days. There's screens everywhere, right? Movies, computer screens, sports, right? That we're sort of spectators in our own lives sometimes, right? But with gratitude, you become a greater participant in your own life. as opposed to being spectators. Okay. So that is how gratitude allows us to celebrate the present. Okay. Now, the second way that gratitude can change people is gratitude blocks toxic negative emotions. Okay. Now, what are these toxic negative emotions I'm talking about? Well, there's envy, resentment, regret, right? And these are emotions that destroy our happiness. Okay. Now, research has shown that gratitude can actually reduce the frequency and duration of episodes of depression. Okay. Now, why is this? You're probably asking me, why does gratitude reduce depression in people? Okay. Well, the way the researchers explain this is you cannot feel both envious and grateful at the same time. Think about this, okay? Envy and gratitude. Can you feel these things at the same time? They're sort of incompatible with each other, right? They're incompatible feelings. If you are grateful, then you really can't resent someone for having something that you don't, right? Um, and so being able to um, look at things that way, um, being able to be grateful and sort of being able to pinpoint that gratitude that you have. Okay. These are very, very different ways of relating to the world. Okay. And and again, research suggests that people who have high levels of gratitude, people who appreciate and are grateful for the silver linings, the positive things in their lives, these people have low levels of resentment and envy. Right. So that is the second way that gratitude can change people, right? It blocks those negative, toxic emotions that kind of come out, right? Now, what is the third way? Well, third way is that grateful people are more stress resistant. Okay. Now, stress, of course, we all know, is a big thing with caregivers, right? We have many, many studies on that. We've done many classes. I've taught many classes, probably with some of you in the audience, about stress and caregiving. Okay, and so this is like a big hot topic, right? There's a lot of studies. There's a lot of studies that show in the face of serious trauma, adversity, and suffering, okay, if people have a grateful disposition, they'll end up recovering more quickly. Isn't that interesting, right? They'll end up recovering and bouncing back more quickly. Okay. Now, why is this, right? Again, we're going to go back to Dr. Robert Emmons, who, is the leading researcher on gratitude. Okay. And he hypothesizes that gratitude gives people a perspective from which they can interpret negative life events and help guard them against post traumatic stress and lasting anxiety. Okay. Now, remember how we talked about earlier that positive self talk and positivity, uh, really helps us um, with the way that we look at things, right? Because we're not focusing on how we have failed or what has gone wrong, right? And being able to look at something positively also means, remember this, that things are within your ability to change, right? They're temporary. They are within your ability to change. Okay. And so, of course, that would make you feel more stress resistant, right? Um, Stress at the root of it, you know, is caused by a sense of um, being out of control, feeling overwhelmed. Okay. That's the root of that feeling of stress is you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can cope with this. I can't do this. I am totally overwhelmed. It's out of control. And that is what sort of triggers people, right? And sort of pushes them toward, oh, I'm so stressed out. What do I do? I don't know what to do. I can't, right? Um, Now, when we think positively and when we sort of are able to look at gratitude, right, and say, okay, things are, you know, a struggle right now. Okay. But how can we change this? How can we move past this? How can we make progress? Right. And it's that, it's that question. How can we change this that gives people back their power? Right. It gives people back their feeling of control, their sense of control. And remember, I just said earlier that control, um, and feeling like you've lost control is the source of a lot of stress, right? So if we can feel like if we can use our own self-talk to look at things and say, okay, I'm struggling, but how can I take control and change the situation? Then that sort of um, builds this feeling and confidence into ourselves that helps us believe, okay, this is temporary and this is within my ability to change, right? And remember how I said earlier, those are the two big things that you believe it's temporary and that you believe it's within your ability to change, right? And that's how we become more stress resistant when we practice gratitude. Okay. Now, the fourth way that gratitude changes people is that grateful people have a higher sense of self worth. Okay. Now, when you're grateful, you sort of have a sense, right? You have a sense that someone else is looking out for you and that someone else has provided for your well being, right? Or you start to notice a network of relationships, past or present, of people who are responsible for helping you get to where you are right now. Okay. And once you start to realize that, once you start to realize you have a support system or that other people are invested in you, that other people have contributed to your life, okay? Once you start to recognize the contributions that other people have made to your life, um, then you sort of are able to realize that other people have seen value in you. Okay. They have, uh, they've found you worthy, basically, um, of their time, of their effort, of their love, of their, energy, right? And knowing that you can transform the way that you see yourself, right? Um, People who have strong support networks, people who have other people to lean on. Okay. Those people who are more widely connected with others. Okay. They generally have a higher sense of confidence, of self worth, right? Because you sort of, if you think about it, that makes sense, right? Because, if you're in for instance, a close knit group of friends, right? You feel like you are an important part of that group. Um, you are essential for that group dynamic, right? And without you, what would that group be like? Okay. It sort of gives you like almost like a place in the world, right? Feeling like, okay, I do have a place here and I do make a difference in someone else's life, the way that other people make a difference in my life, right? So basically, if you look at it, friends, community members, anybody within your support system, right? And remember, a lot of times I have to remind caregivers, when we talk about support system, we're not just talking about your family who is related to you by blood. Okay. Support system can be anyone who supports you. Okay. It could be that neighbor who comes over, with some, nice cut flowers from their garden, and gives you some flowers. It could be that church member, who asks how you are every time he or she sees you. Okay. It could be your friend who, calls you once a month to make sure that you're doing okay. All right. So just keep in mind that support systems are not just people that you are related to by blood. It could include anybody. It could include neighbors, doctors, social workers, therapists, psychiatrists, it a wide range of people, right? And people can be part of your support system for different reasons, right? So, there's that too. Um, but once you realize that you are part of a support system, then that kind of puts you, um, I would say, like in the middle of a web, right? And you're kind of going out in each direction, right? There's an exercise that we do um, where we draw, you in the middle, okay? And we draw little kind of offshoots, the diagram offshoots. And we have you kind of diagram out your support system, right? And it's interesting because, people will say, oh, I don't really have that much of a support system, right? And then they'll start writing, right? And then we talk about, well, it's not just family, people that you're related to by blood. It could be anybody who supports you, right? Oh, okay, all right, okay. And then they start writing more people down. And all of a sudden, wow, they see themselves in the middle with all these bubbles around them, right? And they think, oh my goodness. Number one, I have a support system. Okay. And number two, oh my gosh, I'm at, I'm, I am at the middle of something now. How is that? Right? I am contributing to something and I am an integral part of this, whatever this is. Right. Um, and knowing that you're an integral part, knowing that you are an important part of this process, an important part of life. Okay. I kind of that is definitely a confidence booster, right? It gives you a feel a higher sense of self-worth, right? To know that not only are you contributing to others' lives, but you are also, but that they find the value in you and see that you are worth their contributions as well, right? So that is the fourth way that that gratitude changes people. Is that grateful people have a higher sense of self worth. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is, this is kind of a exercise. If you have, a piece of paper near you, pen and paper, you can write it down. Otherwise, you can kind of just, think about it. Okay. And we're going to do a short little exercise. Okay. And what I would like you to do is think about and focus on things in your life that you are grateful for. Okay. Now, when we think of these things, I want you to be specific instead of vague. Okay. And why is this? Well, this activity is more beneficial. Okay. When you pinpoint specifics, such as, I'm grateful for my husband making dinner last night. Okay. Rather than being general and vague, such as, oh, I'm grateful for my husband. Oh, I'm grateful for my family. Okay. Why is that? Well, I could say that every day. I could say that every day. Oh, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my husband. I'm grateful for my children. Okay. Now that may be true. Okay. But if you're practicing gratitude journaling and you find yourself writing this every day, this is like going to get kind of boring, right? This is going to be the same thing every day. Okay. And remember what I said earlier, right? Our brains, we like newness, right? So once we start to sort of see like something, over and over and over again, our brain, our autopilot just kind of, kicks in and is like, all right, not happening. Like I don't see this anymore. You know. So that's why, you know, the um the the advice that I'm giving you is, you know, pinpoint some specifics. Okay. So instead of just saying, I'm grateful for my family, you could say something like, um, I'm grateful that my family ate dinner together tonight. Okay. So that's very, very specific, right? And perhaps the next night, perhaps the next day it could be something different, right? But we kind of have to trick our minds into thinking, oh, okay, this is new all the time, right? We don't want our brains to get bored and tired of this, because we don't want our brains to just kind of be blind to what we're grateful for, right? Because that's what's happening right now. We're kind of blind about the things that we're grateful for right now. Okay. So how are we going to change this? We're going to change this by being specific, right? Um, and, you know, we're going to practice this, and being specific is important. Okay. Because, you know, other than, because, I just said that, that, we become blind to things over a period of time, right? Now, that part is important, okay? Because gratitude journaling is really only effective over a period of time. Okay. You can't just do it like once and then, think that that's it. Okay. Gratitude journaling has to be kind of a sustained, consistent thing over a period of time. Okay. It doesn't have to be every day. Okay. It could just be, once or twice a week. But, uh, studies have actually shown that if you do this over a period of time, then that's when it's actually effective, right? That's why if you keep writing vague statements such as, I'm grateful for my family, and say you've been doing this for a month. Now think about it every day for a month. Okay. You're writing, I'm grateful for my family. Okay. Even though it may be true. Okay. Um, your brain is thinking, this is the same thing every time I sit down to write about my gratitude, right? And if you find yourself constantly writing the same thing, then you're going to become bored and discouraged with this activity, with this exercise, right? Instead of being able to enjoy the benefits of it. Okay. Now, um, as I said, I want you to take a moment, okay, and think about one specific thing that you are grateful for today. Okay. And you can, type it into the chat if you'd like, if you want to share. You don't have to share. Okay. Uh, Sometimes some of these things are, very personal to ourselves. Okay. But if you want to share, you can type it into the chat. Okay. And um, I will say that for many people who are not used to gratitude journaling, when we first introduce this exercise, okay, um, it's quite difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people kind of um, get stuck, and then they're like, "Ooh, what am I grateful for?" And it takes a moment. It definitely takes a moment. Okay, it takes some thought, right? And then it's like one of those things where once you start, then you can kind of, the list starts, right? Oh, and I'm grateful for this and I'm grateful for that, right? So, so if you're having a hard time in the beginning, don't get discouraged. That's perfectly normal. Okay. Um, we do, it happens quite often. Okay. Because as I said, we become blind to the things that we appreciate, the things that we are grateful for, right? So take a few minutes and think about, what you're grateful for. And as I said, you can share in the chat if you'd like. Okay. Okay. So hopefully you all have come up with something that you're grateful for. Hopefully it's something specific too. Okay. Now, how did this activity make you feel? Okay. Gratitude journaling is a way for people to to begin looking, I should say, at the positive things in life that maybe, they've begun to take for granted, right? Remember how I said earlier that our brains, they crave newness, right? And as soon as that newness wears off, we don't think about it anymore, right? So gratitude journaling is a way for you to kind of um, think back on that and to really sort of remind yourself, if you will, of that, right? Um, Gratitude journaling, I think, comes up most often in November. Okay. In November, you hear of a lot of people who have those, you know, thankful jars, or, maybe they, every day in November, they write, one thing that they're thankful for, because of Thanksgiving, right? It's a way to celebrate, it's a way that some people celebrate Thanksgiving. Okay. And so that's the most, I would say, common, way that I've heard of people doing gratitude journaling, okay, is kind of around the Thanksgiving time, right? But that's, you don't have to be thankful and grateful just in November, right? We can do this we could do this all year round. It's not like it's just for Thanksgiving, right? Um, and if you think about it, how great do you feel around Thanksgiving? When you kind of when you feel grateful, when you feel thankful for the things that you have, right? It's a warm, fuzzy feeling, right? Now imagine that feeling all year round, right? Why does that have to be only in November, right? Imagine that feeling all year round. And that's what gratitude journaling is. Just kind of being able to jot down your thoughts, right? Um, and to really start looking at what you appreciate in your life, right? Another way to do this is before you go to bed, you can think of one or two good things that happened to you today. Okay, that's another way of doing it. If you simply do not want to write it down, maybe it's going to cause you stress to find pen and paper, just do it in your mind. I will say though that writing it down makes it a little bit more real. Okay. I mean, people say the same thing, when it comes to goals and, a bunch of, a contract with yourself and all these things, right? I will say that it is definitely more beneficial if you are able to write it down. Okay. Just because, you know, I think our brains are just in that mode where if we see something written down, if we actual if we take the actual physical steps to writing something down, then it's more likely to stick in our brains, and it's more likely to make an impact, right? As opposed to just any old thing that you're thinking, that you're doing, right? So if you can write it down, I would highly recommend that. Okay. Um, as I said earlier, gratitude journaling is better done a couple times a week. You don't have to do it every day. I think if you were to do it every day, you might get a little bit tired of it. Okay. But 3 to 5 times a week is good. Okay. And just to kind of jot down, you don't have to write a whole essay, right? Just to kind of jot down what made you happy, what made you grateful, what are you thankful for, right? It just, one or two things. Okay. Now, another way is if you do not want to do the journaling route, um, this is actually something that we do in my own family. Because because funny enough, I do have a child that is kind of like Eeyore, you know? And those of you who know what Eeyore is like, he's kind of like, hey guys, and he's always, sad and gloomy and kind of mopey, right? And so here I was thinking about, well, how can I help my child kind of be a little bit more positive, right? And of course, I'm thinking about this gratitude and all this. And I know he's not going to do gratitude journaling. He's 7 years old, right? And so one of the things I started doing was uh, whenever we would sit down at dinner, we would go around the table and we'd say, okay, well, what is one good thing? What is one good thing that happened to you today? Okay. And it kind of, at first, it was kind of like, well, what do you mean good? Like, I had a terrible day, right? Remember, I said he's kind of like Eeyore, okay? um, and, it was like, I can't think of anything. Everything was terrible, right? And okay, well, we'll come back to you. Yeah, we'll go around the table and we'll come back to you. You can go last, that's fine. And so one by one, everybody kind of shares like, oh, I one good thing was I won, my daughter's was I won at tag today, and mine was I got to eat a very yummy lunch, that I was looking forward to, and my husband's was something like I got to work on a really exciting project today at work, right? And by the time we got to my son, he's like, okay, well, you know, I guess one good thing was that I got to read a book that I really liked, you know. And I was like, wow, see, it's not so bad, is it? But even in this little interaction, I tell the story because even in this little interaction, you could see, right? This is kind of like the progression of um how how we get into a groove, I guess, with gratitude, right? With having an attitude of gratitude, right? Because at first it's like, oh, everything is terrible, right? And oh, I can't believe it. I can't find anything good, right? And then once you start hearing about it, once you start kind of little and you find one thing, right? Then it kind of like, okay, kind of opens your eyes and you start thinking, okay, I could come up with something, then you could think of something. Then you start thinking of something else, right? And then you start thinking of, another thing. And pretty soon you have a lot of things that you're grateful for. A lot of things that you're like, hey, I took that for granted. I mean, who would have thought that, having a great book to read is something to be grateful for today? Right? But it is, right? It's a wonderful thing, right? But if we hadn't really reframed the way that we look at it, he would still be going, ugh, terrible day. Nothing good went, bad things happened to me today. Nothing good happened, right? Instead of, oh yeah, something good did happen to me today, you know? And that's just how gratitude works, right? So I'm just saying that if journaling does not work for you, there are other ways of incorporating an attitude of gratitude. You can try, as I've said, you can try, going around the dinner table, or maybe you could do what people do around Thanksgiving, where they write it on a little piece of paper, and they have a little shoebox or a little box that they put all their slips of paper in, or they have a jar that they put slips of paper into. So make it however you want, you know, whatever speaks to you, right? Because the whole point of gratitude journaling is, for it to be a positive thing. It's not meant to be a burden. It's not meant to be a chore, right? It's not meant for you to think, oh, I got to do my gratitude journaling today. That's definitely not what we're going for. Okay. Um, so try to incorporate it in whatever way, works for you, works for your schedule, works for your family, right? There's not one single way to do it. Okay. These are just kind of some uh, examples. Okay. Now, this is just to give you some, food for thought. Okay. So today, now we've talked about how positive thinking patterns and change comes from within ourselves, right? Being able to get to that point where we believe that it's within our ability to change things around us, right? Instead of other things happening around us and, we have no control over, right? The first step to positive thinking is to see the things in your life that bring you joy and give you purpose. Okay. And that's what the attitude of gratitude is, right? Being able to really see these things in your life. What brings you joy? What brings you purpose? What are you grateful for today? You know, um, there are things that we think are just so tiny and minuscule, right? That, oh, how could that even be something to be grateful for? But sometimes it is, right? I'll go back to my example about, a good book, right? Some of us would probably think, oh, what, that's so little, right? But a good book can really bring us joy, right? It can help us learn. It can, give us purpose depending on topic, right? So don't discount the little things in our lives that we've sort of become blind to, or that we think, oh, it's no big deal, right? Because those things, oddly enough, are probably um, the things that bring you the most joy, and you end up figuring out, oh wow, I am grateful for that. That is something good, right? So by understanding and appreciating what lifts our moods and makes us, happy, right? We can more easily learn to let go of the negative and toxic emotions in our lives, particularly when we get stuck in a rut. Okay. When we get stuck in a rut, we are sort of stuck in this cycle of negative thoughts, negative emotions, right? And how do we get out of that? That's hard, right? Uh, one of what we just talked about, gratitude journaling. That's one of, I think, the easiest ways to kind of start to climb out of that rut, to break that cycle. Okay. Um, it's sort of I would say a more concrete way of doing it. Of course, there's other things. Of course, there's other things you can do, right? But this is one of the things that, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps, right? And once we start doing it, and once we start realizing um how good it makes us feel, right? Then we want to do it more, right? So that's kind of why we ended up, using gratitude journaling as a well, how as a primer, I suppose, to an attitude of gratitude. Okay. So, as I said earlier, gratitude journaling is most effective when it's practiced a few times a week. And, you can do it in any form that works for you, for your lifestyle, your situation, your family. There's no right or wrong way to do that. But one of the things I would really, really recommend is trying to be specific instead of vague. Okay. Now, think back to think back to what I said about, we want newness. Our brains want newness. And anything that is not new, we become blind to, right? So that is that. Now, there's a little bit of time left. So I'll go ahead. This is the information I promised you earlier. Okay. This is our 800 number on here. It's 1-800-540-4442. Our website is www.fcsc.usc.edu. And you can go on there, low commitment. You can go on there and check out all our resources and everything. Okay. And once you feel like you're ready, you can give us a call and, talk to one of our lovely family care navigators. Okay. We are also on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Okay. And so we are very connected on social media. Okay. So if you are so inclined, you can, like us, you like our page, or, subscribe to, our channel, whatever it is. Okay. And, so another thing I wanted to bring up to everybody is that our Caregiver Resource Center, as I mentioned earlier, covers LA County. Okay. Family caregivers within LA County. Now, what I want you to know is, since this is a virtual presentation, and probably not everyone who is present today is, a LA County resident. Okay. There are actually 11 caregiver resource centers within the state of California. Okay. It's a statewide system. Okay. It's a statewide system of caregiver resource centers. We just happen to be the one that, is in the LA County area, or covers the LA County area, right? But there are other caregiver resource centers that cover other parts of California. So if or a friend, has any caregiving questions or needs some help or support, please, 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 um, consider the Caregiver Resource Center that covers your county. Okay. All the counties, as I said, all the counties within California are covered by a Caregiver Resource Center. Okay. And so just know that there is help out there. Okay. There is help out there for family caregivers. And you are definitely not alone. Okay. So I'm going to go and check some of the Q&A. Okay. And Carmen, you asked, is thinking about what we are grateful for routinely, like every morning while we garden or right before bed, as effective as writing down what we are grateful for? Um, I think I kind of answered that. Just thinking is, better than nothing. Okay. Just thinking is better than nothing. But if you write it down, it makes it more real for some reason. Some reason. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't tell you why. Okay. But for some reason, when you write it down, it becomes more real. and it is more beneficial to practice it with writing it down instead of just thinking about it. Okay. Now let's look at what else has come up. All right. So we have a bunch of people from different areas in LA County. And we have things that people are grateful for. Thank you. Um, and so good. You all have been sharing what you are grateful for. That's excellent. I am so glad. So I we're going to end a little bit early. I will stay on for a little bit if you want to talk to me. But thank you very, very much for attending this presentation this morning. And I hope you've I hope you've gotten something out of it. Okay. I know a lot of this is more food for thought. Okay. And that's okay too. That is okay too. What I tell people when I do presentations like this, what I tell people is that, you to make a change in your life, you have to want to, you not only do you have to want to make that change, you have to be at a point where, where you can make that change, where you feel like you can make that change. And some people are, might not be there yet, and that's okay. This is really to give everyone some food for thought, so that at some point, when you find yourself ready, when you feel like you're ready, you can think back on this and remember what we've talked about and say, oh, okay, maybe this is what I'll do. Right. So in that way, I hope, this has been helpful for you. And I do hope that you will join us for any other, community ed workshops that we will be holding um, in the future. Okay, you can always check our website. As I said, it's on there. And if you are linked up with our social media, a lot of things get posted on our social media by my lovely coworker, Yvonne Gray, who handles our social media content. Okay, and as always, I am available, and I this is what I do. I give presentations, and I coordinate and plan the events at the center. So this is something that I do quite often. So with that being said, thank you all for being here, and I'll stay after for a little bit, and you that's the end. So thank you for joining. Bye. Hi, Elena.
Hi, Jenny. How are you?
I'm okay. I unmuted you. You
You
have a
know,
question?
no, I just have a comment. I
Oh,
haven't
okay.
presentation like this before from you or anyone else. And I put in the chat even, I stopped journaling because it's just what you said. You get boring because like, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way you presented it, I mean, I already put two things in there because just immediately it showed me a different way to look at things.
Great. I'm so glad to hear that.
And I hate that you weren't able to join us on Sunday. I did not know about this birthday party.
Ah, okay.
contact you guys.
Great.
So
Thank you.
I
Thank you, Elena, for
and
sharing.
are you going to post this?
Um, yes, we will. But I've got to do a little bit of editing on the video first.
Yeah, because several people have asked, but I definitely would love to share this with my support group people.
Sure.
Really-
The goal is to have it up on our YouTube channel. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
The
Oh, yeah.
goal is for that, but it probably will need a little bit of editing before it goes up. So yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just going to keep asking you because Jenny, it was so awesome.
Great. Thank you, Elena. Thanks for telling me that.
All the years I've talked to you, uh, I, this is, like I said, the first time I've ever heard. And if you're going to be presenting anything again, I'm going to go on.
Okay. Great. Elena, do you have any last thoughts? I'm going to unmute somebody else.
That's the only thing.
If you're
Just like I said, you were just so awesome.
okay. All right. Thank you, Elena. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Nidra? I'm sorry. I don't know how to say your name.
That's okay. Donna, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm a person with 2 jobs and an elderly, an aging parent, and I help out. They're independent to a certain point, but do you have any recommendations on how to balance for self-care and self-care? Yeah, balance. Yeah, because it can get a little bit above me.
Yeah, I sure I understand. Actually, we have a bunch of classes happening right now. It's called the Stress Busting Program for Family Caregivers. And that does go over ways of self care, of stress management techniques that you can try out. They talk about different techniques every week. We also discuss different issues that may come up, related to caregiving. And other people can kind of give you some tips as well. It is a class environment. It is a group environment. So you'll be learning as much from the other participants as you will be learning from the instructors. So if that is something that you're looking for, I highly recommend you sign up for those classes, and you can find those on our website. We have a few starting, I want to say, well, we have one starting tomorrow, Friday. And then I believe there's another one that may be starting in May. So if you are on our email list, you'll probably get notifications that we're opening registration for those. So,
Okay, and those are all Zoom courses?
yes, those are all Zoom courses.
Okay, that sounds great. Is there a fee for it, or is there a book that I have to purchase?
No. At this point, everything is no cost.
Okay, all right. Is there a link that you could put in the chat?
Yes. It is. Let's see. I will give it to you. It's www.fcsc.usc.edu. Okay, right there. I just put it in the chat. That's our website. You can, as I said, you can go click around. There's an events calendar, and there's some tip sheets and different things for you to look at. Okay.
Okay, I'll copy it. And did you say there's something happening tomorrow on Friday?
Friday tomorrow they are starting one of the stress busting classes. So it's a 9-week class, and they'll be starting at tomorrow. They'll be starting a set tomorrow, I should say.
Okay, you wouldn't happen to know what time that happens?
Oh, I would have to double check on that. I believe it is in midday, maybe 1 to 3,
but I would need to double check on that.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll just pop this URL in my phone calendar,
Mm-hmm.
and I should be able to get there.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome. Take care, Nindra.
Thank you, you too.
Yes, Angela, can I help you? Angela, did you have a question? Angela? Okay. Let's see. Elia? Is there something I can help you with?
Yes,
Elia?
yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Donna. Wonderful class. I appreciate your time. I was asking if you had any books that you could recommend for gratitude and positive thinking.
Oh, okay. I do have some, but I would need to get back to you on that.
Okay, not a problem. Do you want me to contact you later?
Yes, please. Yes. Mhm.
Okay, is there a number that I can get a hold of you, or do I just contact the US facility?
You can email me at jenny.peterson@usc.edu. I'll put it in the chat right now.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you so much. Also, I love your background. Where did you get your beautiful background?
Just off of the internet somewhere. I think I did a Google search for Zoom.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
for
beautiful.
Zoom backgrounds.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Very bright.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Thank-
I put my email address in the chat. So if you want to
I'll email you.
you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Yep.
I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you, Elia.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Does anyone else have any questions? Comments? Okay, great. All right, thank you everybody for attending. And we'll be ending our webinar now.